All right, I'll be rounding up here by doing one of the big ones that we need to knock out, and yeah, one of the big ones that we probably need to knock out for this season. It is none other than Grisaia Phantom Trigger. God, uh, I this is one of the infamous series of not fan discs, but much lighter, kind of um like short VNs, right? Kinet I forget if it's, like, actually kinetic because I haven't played them, but it's like, um, what they chopped it up into much shorter routes, which is what a lot of, visual novel studios are doing these days, as opposed to having, like, the longer, bigger kind of multi-route, visual novels that most people know and love, right? So this is a spin-off. Grisaia Phantom Trigger is a spin-off of the original Grisaia Trilogy, which is sort of, the Fruit of Grisaia, the Labyrinth of Grisaia, and, um what is it? The Eden of Grisaia. So those three, Grisaia no Kajitsu, Grisaia no Meikyu, Grisaia
So
no
how does that fit
Rakuin.
into it? If that's the all this Eden stuff, what is the Phantom Trigger in God mythology?
I have no idea. I think they just did it because the girls have guns and they just want to sound cool. It's like Girls
I-
Frontline. They're like, wow, guns, trigger, like they're in the
is
bag. It's like a
Badass,
phantom.
dude.
Yeah,
is the
I think
Phantom
that.
Trigger supposed to be what? When Adam eats the forbidden fruit or something, he starts
Yeah,
a Phantom Trigger. I
the
don't know
trigger
where
for
this is
everything.
going.
Yeah, I wish honestly that would probably be a better explanation than what they actually have. But yeah. So this is a spin-off or like timeline wise or universe wise, supposed to be a sequel with different characters after the original Grisaia trilogy. Set in the same kind of school academy, but it's turned into a full kind of like girls and guns, learning how to shoot stuff and like do like dangerous missions, similar to again something like Blue Archive or like a Girls Frontline, whatever stuff like that, right? The girls have guns, they do dangerous mission stuff in the academy, and in this case, with Phantom Trigger, there are also other academies elsewhere in the world, so it's a little bit more of like they also had something like a kind of like a girls in Panzer situation, right? Um, so that's that. It's done by Front Wing and their Grisaia team. Just a note, before I go into this more fully, I have not played Phantom Trigger, uh, the visual novels. I have only played the original trilogy. So this me speaking from that perspective. So going on real quick with the staff, this is done by Biburi Animation Studio. They did like a lot of key animation and like supporting of like other anime series. They were the head animation production studio for, I believe, the 100 Girlfriends Who Really Really Love You or whatever, Hyakano, right, season two, as well as that one isekai that was like chilling in my 30s after I beat the Demon Lord or whatever it was, Anko Keishi, that isekai. So they headed those two as well. And this studio is actually a switch up from the original Grisaia trilogy proper. The original Grisaia trilogy and its animation adaptations were all headed by 8-Bit Studio instead of Biburi Animation. So this is a slight change up. In terms of how the staff is kind of composed, they have a new director. Again, switch up from the Grisaia trilogy. They have a new director in Murayama Kosuke, who was actually the director of the original infamous Tawa on Mondays, Getsuyobi no Tawa ONAs or OVAs with Pine Jam. He's generally he's like a very, very experienced veteran animation director as well as key animation artist, and it kind of shows up in this series. But yeah, Bebody Animation kind of helped support his um, this directorial adventure by staffing staffing the lineup with a combination of parts of the original Grisaia trilogy adaptation team, right? So you'll see uh, Watanabe Akio, who is the infamous, the chef guy, the front wing Grisaia guy, and he worked as animation director, the character designer for the original Grisaia trilogy, and now he's back at it again here. Um, there you'll see what is it? Matsumoto Fuminori heading the music, who worked on BGM in the previous adaptations, and also I guess which this is probably pretty important for continuation purposes. You have Tensho working with the series composition, and Tensho was actually the lead director in the original Grisaia Trilogy adaptations. So these sorts of like bits and pieces, parts of the original Grisaia Trilogy adaptation team were buffeted, supported, added onto by sort of the Biburi Studio connections from Biburi Studio's work on Hyakkano. So you'll find again people like Aoshima Takashi. You'll have people like Hane Hirofume, heading doing who was like the assistant art director for Hyakkano. uh, Most of these names are like generally very experienced, very veteran teams. So this is a pretty solid team going in. There are not a lot of I think newbies here in this group, so which is a rarity, a relative rarity in these days, unless you have a series that just has a lot of money going in. So, pretty interesting staff. The Seiyu, the voice actress slash actor lineup, is also pretty uh loaded. It's a relatively decent who's who of like recent A tier actresses and other supporting cast seiyuu. You have Tanezaki Atsumi, you have Sakura Ayane, Nasuka Kaori, Uchida Maya, Mimori Suzuko, Yonaga Tsubasa, Nagatsuma Juri, and Nanjo Yoshino. And Nanjo Yoshino has been doing a lot of like these like different roles recently. Um, I don't know whether she's just like cattling while the tide is in, right? As the Korean proverb goes, kind of making use of this chance while she has this like a larger brand recognition from her recent wheelings and dealings with Flipside and so on. Um, or whatever's happening. But she's been getting a decent amount of roles recently, which is nice. But yeah, a pretty um, decently loaded role of like A tier actresses, I would say. Moving on to the opening and ending, as well as audio visuals. The opening theme is Zero Ignition and is sung by Uesagi Mao. So Uesagi Mao is one of the current Fripside vocal duo members. So if you guys don't know, um, Fripside in its latest iteration, I think starting from the what was it, Dawn of Infinity, which was uh their song for I forget which adaptation it was, but it was like yeah. So yeah, it was Dawn of the Witch, right? Oh, Majo no Reimeki or something like that. But it's starting from that single, Dawn of Infinity. I believe they had a duo that was um composed of Uesagi Mao and Abe Hisayo. So these two would literally be duo vocals consistently for the main band that is Flipside. While obviously the composer and like the synth and the band man behind it, the core band man who's been there all the time, would be Yaginube Satoshi, right? Um, so that's one of the vocal duo, Mao, sings the opening for this, and eh, the song itself is fine. I don't think it's super stand out necessarily. The vocals are fine. The visuals themselves are clearly a little bit budget in terms of visuals for an opening in the year 2024. You could kind of see this panning out in slightly clunky animations when there are like kind of actual 2D animations. For instance, especially in that one scene where they had to like rotate around they had to imitate a camera rotation around like one of the characters, right? Um, v- into kind of like this time leap, time skip kind of scene, and that was when I saw that animation, I was like, "Oh, this is really clunky. This is awkward. I don't know." So there are some clunky parts to the opening, and the parts that aren't clunky, most are just like slowly panning background visuals and moving 3D models like cars and stuff like that. So it was quite budget, even if it was the year 2011, 2012, I'd be like, this is okay, I guess. But in the year 2024, it's definitely a little bit budget. The ending is Dandelion by Yoshino Nanjo Yoshino, who is one of the most famous former Fripside vocals. And she also voices a character named Maki in the cast of the series. But it's the song itself is a very standard, slow, and it's nondescript and song ED sung by Nanji Yoshino, which I personally, this is completely personal opinion. I think it's a slight waste of vocals, right? Like you bring Naja Yoshino here. Yes, she does voice a character in the series. You bring Naja Yoshino here to sing just like a completely nondescript and song ballad. Come on, like can you get her to sing something decent? Come on, guys. Um, so a little bit of waste of vocals in my opinion. And the visuals itself, the storyboarding, it's literally all just minimal looping animation, like, wave hair waving in the wind and stuff like that, as well as completely static panning backgrounds and stuff like that. So I think the OPED was not up to standards for what we might expect from an OPED again in the year 2024. But I guess we can't have everything, right? The animations in the actual anime episodes are done pretty well overall, and assuming that they don't have, $100 billion in the tank, which is what I'm assuming with this sort of like lineup, Peabody Studio, Animation Studio, and stuff like that. Um, the static kind of talking scenes, which there are a lot of, are fine. And when the animation kind of needs to ramp up with stuff like running or breaking stuff or fighting, it looks relatively smooth compared to it doesn't look like super out of place or like super awkward or like, the running like in betweens are like kind of like doing in weird static spastic spurts. It's all kind of very relatively well done, especially considering the budget. And I'm assuming, again, that's the experience of Murayama Kosuke, the director coming in. It's the experience of obviously Watanabe Akio and the others kind of helping to sign um, uh, and coming in because I believe Watanabe Akio is both doing both the character design and he's heading uh, as the chief animation director for this series. So their experience really shines, I think, in this, where the visuals are balanced quite well for what it is. The BGM is decent. Probably there are parts of it that are copied over from the VN original, and which is fine. Generally, it fits well with the scenes and overall provides slow-paced school life atmosphere that the story usually demands at times. Like those like standard kind of key studio kind of like sphere or whatever those early late 2000s leading up to all the way up until like 2020 2014, right? That's sort of like whenever you have a school life visual novel you have that classic uh, uh soundtrack, right? um I think that sort of really fits in well with this series and it kind of provides a change in tone. um or it elevates the tone of those school scenes. So I'll probably give it plus points for that. So that was the audio visuals overall. Going on with the story. Um, Again, the story is kind of you have these girls. They are, just trying to be regular girls, but while also being, dangerous mission takers and like not mercenaries, like I guess mercenaries, like contractors, right? Military contractors in a sense. Uh, just living in a dangerous world where, full of dark choices by the government and like terrorists and dark people and blah 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 blah. And um essentially it's Grisaia light. Um it's Grisaia Trilogy light because the core value, the core objective of the series is similar to the original Grisaia trilogy, where although in the original Grisaia trilogy, the girls weren't like all mercenaries and running out and training themselves with guns or anything like that. The point of the Grisaia trilogy was that you had each of the girls with their backgrounds and you would develop them and much like a standard visual novel, right? And so their drama and their pain and their redemption, with the help of the main character, of course, were all kind of centered around the academy and why their parents sent them to that academy and the problems lying, you know, underneath the academy and its origins and how it's connected to the military and the government and stuff like that, right? So it's that, but now you have a bunch more characters, and the girls now hold guns, right? So in terms of that sort of premise being said, the way the story is generally balanced out, screen time wise, is that 80% of the series is them just kind of trying to develop the various cast members, by developing the various cast members. I mean, mainly the one or two characters that are in focus for each like mini arc. So it's like you'll have, one or two or three episodes where one or two characters are in focus. Like these are the characters that everybody's trying to save. These are the characters that everybody's kind of talking about. These are the characters that have sort of like the retrospections or the introspections back to when they were young and they have the flashbacks like, oh, I came to this like I have trauma because of blah 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 blah. But I'll I'll look all forward. I'll do my best. I won't ever give up. The whole 9 yards shebang cheese, right? Um, so it's a lot of it's mini arcs focus on those like one or two girls. And there's a lot of talking between the girls and eating bentos and talking in the classrooms and talking outside and talking in the principal's office and talking talking in the playground and talking in it just it's a lot of that sort of talking to do character development while relaxing in the school. And then there are like 20-30% of it is some of the action whenever they get a mission or like a crisis happens, like one of the girls gets in trouble, they're held hostage or the terrorists are attacking or they need to carry out this mission or whatever it is. Then the action happens and there are some slight fight scenes. They're not like anything impressive, or like action scenes, they're not anything super impressive, but those do happen. And it's usually um not that impressive, like, or not. I'm not talking about the animation, I'm talking about the story, like the story when the action and like the drama happens are not that impressive. And this has always been like a decent gripe that I've had about the entire Grisaia trilogy, not just Phantom Trigger, but like the how the Grisaia team writes about like the drama in general, because I feel like they're not good at writing out these big um overarching, like the government is getting involved, the military is getting involved, and the kids just have to brave it out and fight against the evil guys in the government and the military. And they have to use all their wits and blah 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 blah. And they're not good at writing that sort of premise, as well as centering the character's drama over it. Some of the routes, I'm not going to spoil anything, but some of the routes that I dislike the most in terms of the original Grisaia trilogy, and part of why I didn't really also like how Grisaia ended, um, was because the writers were not very good at creating that sort of big world building, overarching kind of lore. And it kind of just ended up being like a jumbled mess where they're like, oh, there are evil mercenaries and the government is limiting us. So, but we're gonna ignore the government. Fuck you. We're gonna go out with guns to save everybody. And it's a very green eggs and ham basic. It kind of starts out as like a very serious like the government is restricting me. The government is restricting you. The government has been restricting my father, who's a government bureaucrat or big wig, has been restricting me for years on end. Blah blah. Blah. And then it kind of just ends up resolving at the end into a very basic like, no, I gotta be free. I'm gonna ignore what the principal and the government says, and I'm gonna save all my friends. Which is again a little bit, a little bit too much, too basic, very predictable for my liking. Um, and I think the same sort of thing pans out in Grisaia Phantom Trigger, and you can see that in the first episodes where it's a very kind of the setup is a very basic series of or retrospections where they're just uh like why do I Why was I born? Why did my life turn out this way? Why do I have to um why did everybody just like that I cherish just die like that around me? And like and you have the other girl that's just like my family has been doing this. My family has been keeping me caged in like this all my life, and blah blah blah. And then the rest of it, it's a very predictable, very simple development, story development towards them being like, no, I want to be free. I want to save my friends. It's like I won't be chained by the people trying to hold me back in my um the big wigs or the people in the shadows who are trying to hold me back. My family's trying to hold me back, and I won't be chained by that anymore. And that sort of very um standard variant of of these sorts of like girls that have trauma and are in this weird context situation setup. So I wasn't very impressed by these sorts of stories. I wasn't impressed by within the original Grisaia trilogy. The parts of the Grisaia trilogy that I liked were not the parts where they had to fight the military and the government, but really when they did a little bit more organic introspection and retrospection on the traumas that they experienced and how that uniquely affected the characters and why that's why their mental state is where it's at now, and how they slowly like recover from that mental state without necessarily being involved in these huge like, yeah, let's go and rescue my friends from terrorists, like having more quiet, more realistic ways of doing mental therapy with within the character, with the character's friends, with the protagonist or the male supporting character in this case, with the others, is I think a more organic and more um, believable, more unique, more novel, more valuable way to run this story rather than just being like, yeah, I had this trauma. And then later on, there's another drama that's very similar to this other trauma that comes in. And this time, I'm going to stand up for what's right. And it's a very like, okay, so like you're just going to do this? You're just going to do this for every girl? Is this how it goes? And it's not very exciting, in my opinion, because I've seen this movie 1,000 times. And to me, the important part again is not how the girl looks at the drama, the hostage situation, the terror situation, and decides to go, no, I will stand up to what's right. That's not the important part. The important part is the mental evolution to the slow mental evolution uh, as time progresses, right? So it's a little bit unfortunate that Phantom Trigger went this way. And on top of that, because it is like kind of a diluted uh Grisaia trilogy spin-off, right? It's just the same sort of structure, but like there are twice as many girls, right? It just didn't really impress me in any ways. I feel like it just continued on it just extended upon all like of the boring stuff that Grisaia should have stopped doing. But then they were just like, oh, this is like the main brunt of it, right? We should just keep doing this. And I feel like that was a huge mistake on Phantom Trigger's part. And I don't know, it's just super boring. There's not even like proper uh like the main character or like I'm not saying that Grisaia needs to be kind of this harem rom-com kind of thing, but at least when the Grisaia trilogy had its harem, its main character, and like the back and forth, there was kind of like a reprieve. There was a little bit of a more um accented back and forth dialogue kind of business going on, right? And there was like another avenue for writers to write in stuff like jealousy or like the girls just popping up on the male character or doing these like comedic back and forths a little bit better. But I think Grisaia Phantom Trigger has lost a lot of that edge. And I think part of it's the fact that they discard the idea of the harem main male character and just kind of do this like girls with guns just all running around like again like an assault lily or a momentary lily or girls frontline or whatever. Part of it's that, and I just think that the other part is just I don't know. They're writing the writing, the comedic writing, the slice of life writing, the school life writing, and this series just is not as good as it was in the original Grisaia. Um, which is again very unfortunate because that's a huge part of the screen time, right? As I mentioned before, 80% of this story is them trying to develop the characters through, talking and kind of doing introspections and retrospections while they're relaxing in the school. So it is unfortunate that that writing has gone down in quality compared to the original trilogy. But um, but yeah, I think overall it's a very middling series at best. And if I wanted to be harsh, it was just like this represents like the most useless parts of the Grisaia trilogy, story wise, structure wise, literature wise. I would say overall, the animation, the audio visuals were decent, and I was surprised at the level. I was honestly surprised at how okay it held up. The audio visuals held up, compared to probably the budget that they had. But I was extremely disappointed. It was extremely kind of like the talking isn't really going anywhere. The When the talking does develop around these two characters, it's a very standard, predictable way that they develop around like an incoming crisis. Um, and even that structure wasn't really the part that I wanted for Sai anyways. So it's like the story was just very, very not what I wanted. Um, and it was very just mediocre objectively overall. I would probably give this a 4 out of 10. I'll probably give this a 4 out of 10. I don't think it's like just specifically horrible, but there's a lot of the question that's like constantly running into through my mind is like, why am I watching this anime? Like, what are these characters doing? All they're doing is like talking themselves into a situation, into a story structure that I've seen a million times in other anime before. Like, why am I wasting time watching this series? Um, Especially when, I was not a fan of how some of the parts in the original Grisaia developed. And the original Grisaia, despite those flaws, was still 100 times better than Grisaia Phantom Trigger. So it's very confusing to me as to where um the series expects to find its like attraction. Um my personal opinion is that most of the popularity of Grisaia Phantom Trigger honestly is not doesn't necessarily come from the original story itself, but it comes from the it riding the coattails of the original Grisaia trilogy that was released on Steam, and it's one of the series that was a little bit earlier on the timeline with regards to visual novels being released on Steam and so on, and that's where they kind of got their popularity from. Because for those of you who don't know, a lot of a visual novel series, just because of a lack of supply, a lot of visual novels that got released earlier on in Steam before like the huge kind of current visual novel industry that we see today, um, localization industry that we see today. A lot of visual novels that got localized a little bit earlier on ended up becoming popular just because the Western audience didn't really have much else to watch or read, so they naturally just picked those and became popular. But I don't think that my opinion is that Grisaia Phantom Trigger did not really find most of its popularity through its story. Is my hot take of the week. So I don't know. I'm just not a very big fan of how it's structured. I think the main saving grace is again the audio visuals, but you know, even that is there are clearly some parts where it's budget. So it's I can't really give it an average or above average score, so I'll have to go with a 4 out of 10 here. But it is unfortunate. Um, I kind of wished a little bit better from Grisaia after the original trilogy ended, but Grisaia Phantom Trigger never really my cup of tea. So, you know, it's a little bit unfortunate that it ended up this way. So, But yeah, that was my review for Grisaia Phantom Trigger, a visual novel original done by Frontwing from obviously the original Grisaia Trilogy team. And the anime adaptation was done by Bibury Animation Studio. So, if you really want to watch, you know, the wrap up of the Grisaia franchise, although I think I'm not sure if they're probably releasing more stuff after this, right? Um, Please do check it out. So yeah.